Right, what I'm going to do now is show you a basic structure of a Kotlin application, okay? And we're going to go real hardcore in a sense, and we're going to use Vim. We're not even going to use an IDE for now. So I'm going to create a file called main.kt, which I could call anything. And I'm going to create a function, main, that takes args, which is an array of string. And what this is going to do is print line, hello, world. Now, notice a couple of things. First of all, there's no semicolons. Kotlin, actually, semicolons are optional. There's only a single specific place that is required when we're declaring enum classes, which have some method calls. But otherwise, semicolons are completely optional. You can see that there's, contrary, if you come from C# or Java, one thing that you immediately notice is this is just kind of like a function. In fact, this fun is how we create a function in Kotlin. And I've just created a function in a file. There's no anything, like there's no static class, there's nothing. And that's because in Kotlin we have top-level functions. So kind of like JavaScript, you can just open a file and create a function in it. Why have I called this main? It's not to match the file name. But main is a special function in Kotlin, which is the entry point. So from a Java perspective, this would be public static void main. From a C#, this would be a static main class, and then again a static main method. So if you create a function here with this signature, which is main args array of string, Kotlin will interpret that as the main entry point of the application. So I'm going to just save this, and you can see that now I have a file called main.kt. And I'm going to go ahead and compile this. I'll say main.kt. And what's that done is output some file for me. It's created a meta-inf folder with some meta information, which we won't worry about right now, but it's created this main kt.class, which is what we saw in the intro, right? We had this concept of I take a Kotlin file and I create a Java bytecode from it. So let's go back and edit this. Now, this main entry point, as I said, is the main entry point for Kotlin application. Except one thing that you'll notice is that there's no package information either. Now in Kotlin, we have the concept of packages, but if you don't specify a package, it's going to interpret it as the default package. But I can actually come here and write package and say com, Hadi, Hariri, for example, Kotlin course. And then go ahead and save this, and then let's recompile this again. And now let's see what the output is. We can see that it's kind of created this folder com, which we can change to. And then there's a folder Hadi Hariri, and we can change to that. And then we get death by 1,000 folders, or otherwise known as welcome to Java, whereby, you know, every segment of a namespace is translated into folders. Now, in fact, in Kotlin, and we'll see this a little bit later on, you don't have to follow this idea of kind of like following the same structure of your folder with package names, although it is recommended. It's a nice way to do things, especially because, again, Kotlin targets the JVM, and a lot of Java developers, they're accustomed to this convention, so it's not a bad thing to do. But there we have the main KT class now under that folder. So as you can see that by default, main KT, if you don't specify a package, it just uses the default package. Okay, so now we've got this file created and everything, and let's try and run it. So I'm going to do Java, as I mentioned, and I'm going to do com Hadi Hariri dot Kotlin course, I believe we called it. And the main entry point would be main KT. Okay, so that's how I would run a Kotlin application. It's the package name dot and then the file name where that main function is located. Hit enter. Oops, it doesn't work. Now, this doesn't work because of this error here. It says no class definition error found. The reason for this is because Kotlin comes with a runtime. So it comes with a small runtime that you need to ship with your applications. In fact, you can actually include it with the compiler and kind of embed it, which we'll see in a moment. But you do need this Kotlin runtime. So the reason that this is failing is because it cannot find the Kotlin runtime. And you can see that it's looking for Kotlin JVM internal intrinsics, and it cannot find it. Now, if I want to run this, what I would need to do is find where the Kotlin runtime is installed. So if we use the unzip folder, if we downloaded the Kotlin compiler as a zip folder and we unpackaged it, there's going to be a lib subdirectory in that package where it has the actual runtime folder, runtime library, which is a kotlin-runtime.jar. If we installed it as part of brew, then we need to figure out where that's installed. Now, in my case, this is installed in user local cdar Kotlin 1.0 blah blah blah. So if we go ahead and let me just open up another terminal window, and let's make this a little bit bigger. And if we go to user local seller, not cdar, seller, Kotlin 1.03 libexec, and we can see here that I have a lib folder and a bin. If we change to bin, you can see that we've got the Kotlin compiler JSVM. Now, forget about these for now. This is Kotlin compiler, and this is Kotlin compiler to the JavaScript, but we have it there. And this is just to execute some Kotlin applications, which we'll see in a moment. Let's change back to the lib folder, and I'll show you the runtimes. So you can see that I have the Kotlin runtime. Okay. Now there's a standard library as well. You don't see it here, and we'll see later on because the standard library is part of the standalone compiler is actually shipped as part of the Kotlin runtime. Okay, so going back to our code, we need to get this to run. And we do this by specifying where our runtime library is. So it was local seller Kotlin 1.03 libexec Kotlin, lib Kotlin runtime.jar. Okay. And then now we go ahead and put our actual application. So that would be hadihariri.kotlin course main kt. And there we go. We get the output. Okay, so now we get our application running. It's found all of the files, and we get the output. Now, notice one other thing here is that on the path, I've specified the dot, meaning you have to include the current folder. Okay, because otherwise it's not going to find your package. So if we go back here, this is a common mistake some people might make initially, and they say, okay, class path, just the Kotlin runtime. You can see that it says I could not find the main class com.hadihariri.kotlincourse.main.kt because we've just left out this folder structure. So that's why we add to the class path the current folder so that it knows where it has to look. Now, another option to run this without having to do all of this class path thing is just to use a script that's included as part of the compiler, which is called just Kotlin, and I can just say, Kotlin and run the class file or a jar file, and we'll see that in a moment when we actually create a jar file. So when I did the Kotlin C, as you know, what it did is basically create this folder structure, but it created the main kt.class, not here, but inside the folder structure. Okay, so let's go ahead and if we do a list here, we can go ahead and remove rf.com, and we'll remove rf main kt.class. So we're back to kind of like the only thing that we have available is the source file. Now, what I'm going to do is go ahead and compile again. But this time, instead of just compiling to create a class file, I'm going to create what's called a jar file. And jar is basically a collection of classes in Java. So, if your application has multiple class files, you're not going to ship 100 different class files. What you do normally is you zip these up into a single file, which is called a jar, and that's what exactly a jar is. It's an archive of class files. So the Kotlin compiler also has that option to just create a jar file for you. And what we do is say we want to create main kt and call that a jar file hello.jar. And once that's done, if we do a list L, you can see that you have hello.jar. Now, if I run this, I'm going to run into the same issue as I did before, because again, it's going to try and find the class path. It's not going to be able to find it. So the Kotlin compiler also comes with an option which allows us to include the runtime. So I can just say include runtime inside of this, and that's going to include the runtime. And now I can just say Java jar. I have to say jar because I'm saying to Java to run a jar, not a class file, and now I get the hello world. And that's much easier to now run without having to include all of the things around the class path, etc.